Tonight, we're taking a look at the future of General Manager Marc Bergevin of the Montreal Canadiens. Will he be sticking around beyond the final year of his contract? We also have an update on the future of Adam Larsson with the Edmonton Oilers. Could a contract extension possibly be worked out? We're also looking at some trade talk around the Chicago Blackhawks and a couple of the younger players. And could Pekka Rinne end up finishing his career over in Europe? We'll discuss the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. And now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about today. I want to start with what was brought up on Saturday headlines by Elliot Friedman about the future of Marc Bergevin, the GM of the Montreal Canadiens. Now, it was acknowledged here that he's going to be entering the final year of his contract with the Habs. And of course, many coaches and GMs don't like to really enter the final year of their deal, preferably without knowing what the future holds and either working at a contract extension or, deciding what comes next for the franchise. Now, of course, we know Bergevin has been a very busy guy before the season, getting the team ready. They kind of built off their bubble playoff success last year in the 2020 playoffs, made a lot of offseason moves, really made a lot of things that to really get this team ready for this year. And for the most part, I think we can say the Habs have had a decent season, but certainly more so as of late, things haven't gone as well, and they're pretty well stuck in that fourth spot in the North Division. But there was points in the season where it looked like they very well would likely finish higher up, possibly even challenge for first place, but that doesn't seem to be obviously in the cards here any longer as the season's winding down and getting ready. They seem destined for a first round matchup, most likely with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but of course they could end up possibly swapping spots with the Winnipeg Jets in third place and maybe doing battle with the Oilers. But either way, I do think their playoffs will have a big impact on the future of Bergevin and his role with the Montreal Canadiens moving forward here as well. Many felt that going into the year, there was a lot of pressure on Bergevin to make the playoffs and at least, have some playoff success, especially after all the money they invested in this team and spent during the offseason. Like I said, they brought in guys like Tyler Toffoli and Josh Anderson via trade and free agency. They traded for Jake Allen. They brought in Joel Edmondson. They really made a lot of fairly significant changes and spent right to the salary cap. They're a team that had lots of flexibility a year ago and now couldn't get Cole Caulfield into the lineup for several games because of the lack of cap flexibility and how tight things were. And of course, as of late, they've run into several injury issues. Carey Price has been out for a while. Philip Deneau was just diagnosed with a concussion. And they've had other guys like Tatar out as well. Paul Byron. The list is getting fairly long as we get ready for the playoffs. So, I would probably be a little concerned if I was Marc Bergevin, given how the team has fared as of late, combined with his health injury. Of course, they've been without Brendan Gallagher now for a long time, and I think his injury, maybe more so than any other one, has had the biggest impact because I do really see him being like the heartbeat and the pulse of this team, and without him in there, it really makes a huge difference, especially amongst the forward group. So we'll see what happens here for Bergevin and Jeff Molson, what they work out. Will they work out an extension? Will they decide maybe it's time for Bergevin to maybe go into a different role? Will ownership want to go in a completely new direction? I mean, just to throw this out there, I know I mentioned it before, but there certainly is reports about Patrick Roy wanting to re-enter the NHL, preferably in a management or possibly a coaching position. And I think that his interest certainly is with the Habs. Now, of course, they're not going to hire him if there's no opening because that's not possible. But I do wonder if that's something they would consider. And I think if the Habs either, bow out really quick and early in the playoffs, will they decide that maybe it's time to go in a new direction? We'll see, but certainly going to be interesting times in Montreal based on how this season has kind of wrapped up here, and how other playoff success or lack thereof will certainly, I think, determine a big part of what his future holds with the franchise. Now, moving on to some other quick news here, the NHL's announced that they are going to be relaxing some COVID protocols for the Stanley Cup playoffs, provided that the teams are at 85% vaccination rate. So for the teams that meet that criteria, they can have a little bit more flexibility. They can visit each other in their hotel rooms. They can have more dining options, outdoor dining without having their mask on so close, and a few other things. They kind of not have the players be in isolation so much, especially when they're on the road. So that's certainly going to be welcome news for many NHL players, who's along with the officials and many of the people who's been spending an awful lot of time in isolation. It's been a very tough season, so to get a little bit of a break that way, it's certainly going to be very much welcome. I believe they said on Saturday headlines about half of the NHL playoff teams in the U.S. will meet that criteria likely as of pretty much now, and there probably could be a few more within the short term. The Canadian teams are just starting to get lined up for their first shot of vaccine. The Maple Leafs are getting theirs tomorrow. I believe believe the Habs have theirs lined up here in a couple days as well, and the other teams will all be getting done gradually here as all the provinces in Canada have lowered many of the age requirements for vaccine eligibility. So a lot of the NHL teams will have at least one shot probably within the next week, but of course they have to wait a period of time to get their second one, so it's going to be pretty deep into the playoffs before they'll be considered fully vaccinated. So those Canadian teams won't really get a whole lot of a break through all or maybe not any of these Stanley Cup playoffs. Before we jump into the latest news here as well, I just want to take a quick second to acknowledge our channel sponsor. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscape. Of course, with Manscape, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping into all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. And it was also brought up on Saturday headlines with the future of Adam Larsson with the Edmonton Oilers. Now, Adam Larsson was a player that I know at one point was kind of considered maybe a trade target for the Edmonton Oilers to consider upgrades of other parts of the team, but now it's looking like he's a really good chance he's going to stay and be an Oiler for an extended time. Friedman reported on headlines that prior to the NHL trade deadline, they did start having contract extension discussions, and even though they're not done, things progressed really well, and they're not expected to resume talks until the season is over, but it's looking like a 4-year deal is likely on the horizon for Larson and the Oilers. I mean, he is a good fit there to a degree, but they certainly have some younger defensemen, and you have to wonder at what point they're going to start to make a little bit more room for them. But obviously guys like Bouchard and Broberg, etc., are going to want more prominent roles here, but they're going to have to earn that over the next couple of years, and we'll see. But I know Larson was a guy that was kind of uncertain what was going to happen with him. Of course, they got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. That's a much, arguably more important piece for them to get figured out here. And I know there's some talk that, especially due to his lack of production at 5-on-5, that they're kind of playing hardball with contract negotiations, and that perhaps a deal to get him signed is going to be more challenging. If he does not reach a deal with the Oilers, he'll certainly be one of the bigger names available in free agency, and be interesting to see what kind of offers get offered to him based on how his season's gone. He's a great player. Certainly played a good role to Oilers his entire time after being drafted first overall, but you have to think that he's going to have to give them a little bit more of a team-friendly deal, I think, for the odds to be better to stay. But we'll see. I mean, there's lots of time for negotiations to be completed here. Now, also, as I mentioned, a little bit of trade talk around a team like the Chicago Blackhawks and a couple of their younger pieces. Now, there's some wonder what the future holds for Dylan Strome. He's kind of coming off a bit of a down season. So, the Hawks would be selling low if they decided to move on from him. They got him from Arizona after struggling to start his career. Didn't really give up a whole lot for him. So, from that perspective, they don't really need a lot back to make it worth their while. But, I mean, at some points, he's had some good chemistry with his former junior teammate, Alex DeBrincat. And certainly, looked like he could be a more consistent, bigger part of the team. But obviously, having some other guys come along, it's kind of bumped his role down, in my opinion, a little bit as well. But Dylan Strome is a player that probably a little bit less likely to be traded. He is a restricted free agent coming up, so there's a pretty good chance I think he gets qualified and signed. But his long-term future, I think, certainly is questionable, and some wonder maybe if he could even be exposed to the Seattle Kraken as a potential player that they could look at taking. So we'll have to see how the Hawks decide to play out here with their expansion draft protection, but he could be made available based on they're not being overly pleased with his progress this year. And another player that's going to be interesting to watch is rookie Pius Suter. Now, of course, he came over from Switzerland, signed a 1-year contract, so he's going to be an RFA this summer. Had a pretty good year so far. He's got 13 goals, and it's certainly earlier in the year, especially, was a little bit more in the conversation for the Calder Trophy. At this point, he's certainly been outdone by guys like Kaprizov. You could even argue, obviously, Jason Robertson, Tim Stützle, Josh Norris would certainly all be ranked ahead of him as well as a few others, including teammate probably Kevin Lankinen as well. But, he's certainly a guy that got a chance to play a bigger role than he probably expected, and the team probably expected this year, given all the injuries that the Hawks ran into. Of course, they were without Jonathan Taves all year, which they did not expect. Kirby Dach got hurt in the World Juniors, missed majority of the season. Andrew Shaw, Zach Smith, all those guys were on LTIR all year. Shaw just retired. So they had a lot of guys out of the lineup that they were going into training camp expecting to have. So it kind of elevated his role. He was able to take advantage of it. So because of that, he's certainly going to be wanting a decent sized raise on a contract. And there is some concern over what the Hawks are going to be willing to offer. And obviously depends on where they see him in their future, because when these other guys come back, like Doc is back now, if Taves comes back next year, are they going to be able to want him to be able to play him in the lineup in a high enough level for him to continue to succeed? And depending on what his contract ends up being, there is a possibility that some NHL reporters are saying that he could maybe be traded, but we'll see. I think he's a player that they would probably like to keep, but a lot of that's going to depend on how negotiations go. And lastly here, there are reports that the Nashville Predators longtime goaltender Pekka Rinne very well could head over to Finland to finish out his NHL career, and that this very well could be his last year with the Preds and the NHL. Now, of course, he is a pending unrestricted free agent. We've heard rumors going into the trade deadline that he was not a player that was likely to be made available unless he was going to request it from the Preds. But, of course, Nashville was in the process of turning things around and getting themselves back to compete for a playoff spot, so it didn't really make sense for the team to do that anyhow. Of course, this was well ahead when Nashville was really starting to bottom out, but then, of course, picked things back up and instead got themselves back into the race here. And as we head into the final few games of the season, things look decent for them to make it, but of course, they're battling it out with the Dallas Stars here for that final playoff spot in their division. But there is reports out of the Finnish league in Liga that there is a real possibility he could be going over to sign with Karpat once his season is over, that he'd like to play at least one season there before he retires. So we'll see. But right now, their senior director, Harry Aho, who's the dad of Sebastian Aho of the Carolina Hurricanes, who runs that organization, had made comments to the media over there saying that they've already had several conversations with his representatives to get him to be signed once his future in the NHL was done with, and it made it sound like it was coming up here at the end of this year. So if those reports are true, the Predators will be in need for another goaltender. Of course, they've got UC Saros, and they have some other guys in the organization who could certainly look to fill that void. They could look outside the organization as well, but it could be the end of an era for Rinne with the Predators as he winds things down over in Finland. So we'll have to wait to confirm those reports, but that's how things are looking right now. The reports out of Finland are indeed true. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you stick around and subscribe. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news from around the entire NHL. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.